The Idol Hero, Songstress, by DrgnMstr. Chapter 15, Quirk Miracles. Before we begin, just wanted to say, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or just want to talk about the chapter. And that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Yume awoke a couple of days after being admitted to the hospital. At first, she was groggy from the medications the hospital used to keep her unconscious, but the sounds of a television playing a kids show helped bring her back to awareness. That, and the tighter-than-expected grip of a small hand holding onto her left hand, helped ground her into the present. At the same time, she could feel the presence of another hand carding through their hair, as well as a gentle voice humming in the background that identified at least one other person in the room. She felt the corners of her mouth turn upwards in a smile at the gentle touches, and wanted nothing more than to lay there and enjoy them.
I see that smile, young lady.
A loving but concerned voice gently chided her.
Do me a favor and open your eyes for me, okay?
She heard a gasp come from the left, followed by a brief intensifying of the pressure in her hand, signaling that Ari had heard their mother speak. Slowly, she opened her eyes and turned to the right to look up at Namiri.
Hey, Namiri Mama.
She said quietly.
Where's Mom?
At the same time, she returned her sister's excited squeeze with one of her own.
You're awake, Nisan.
The little girl exclaimed in the best approximation of a happy voice she was capable of giving.
I was so worried. I'm sorry to have scared you, Ari-chan,
she said, as she turned her head toward her white-haired unicorn sister.
I didn't mean to.
The older sister didn't get the opportunity to say much else as the little girl half climbed up on the bed and sprawled across her chest to hug her. Though the white-haired girl wasn't crying, she was shaking rather badly. Namiri simply let the two work it out while still carding her hand through the teen's hair.
Shh, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
The teen whispered Oh, sorry.
Shh, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
The teen whispered soothingly as her left arm hugged the girl.
It's going to be okay now. But you were hurt, and they cut you open, and they wouldn't stop.
The little girl exclaimed as a couple of tears ran down her face. It was evident that whatever they did to Yume triggered the poor girl. The teen looked up to her second mama and silently asked for an explanation.
They had to operate. I'd rather not go into too many details, in case I get something wrong. Can you wait for the doctor to give you an explanation?
The pro-hero asked in a soothing voice. Her eyes flicked down to the lower part of Yume's body, which gave Yume some clue as to what was going on. The teen continued to hold the girl while trying to figure out how best to put this to her. Finally, she said,
They did what they had to do to save my life.
She smiled when the little girl looked up at her and said,
Did they explain to you what was happening to me? They said you were bleeding, but that had to be a lie. I couldn't see any blood.
The little girl answered. Yume was careful to not let the anger she felt toward that Yakuza man show on her face at that moment. If it were up to the greenette, the man would have suffered greatly for harming such a cute girl. Instead, she nodded slowly and said,
I was bleeding, but it was inside my body where you wouldn't have been able to see. And unless I miss my guess, that blood had nowhere to go.
she added, looking to the adult in the room for confirmation. Getting it, she added.
If they didn't cut me open, I would have died.
More tears fell down the little girl's face, which prompted the teen to reach down and to kiss the girl's forehead.
But they gave me a special medicine, so I don't feel it. But they said they had to leave you cut open.
The exclamation caused Namiri to sigh deeply. So much for waiting.
I'm sure they had a good reason for that,
the teen soothed, though she could easily guess the reason. She had spent some time looking up treatments for intersex and transgendered people, and knew many of the procedures involved, at least the generalities of them.
But I'm not bleeding now, am I? Only a little.
Eri responded.
Not as much as...
She stopped what she was about to say and looked like she was about to cry harder. The teen patient gave the girl another hug as she said,
Let's let the doctors explain that, okay? Since they're not panicking, I'm sure it's nothing too bad or dangerous. As I said, I'm not going anywhere. But promise?
the girl asked plaintively.
I promise.
The intersex teen said as she kissed the girl's forehead again. As the little girl rested her head down on the teen's shoulder and just continued to hug her, the teen turned her attention to her second mother.
So where is everyone? Sho and Azashi are likely on their way here, since school let out an hour ago. Your mother is waiting in the reception area for your friends, who have been coming by every day after school. Well, except Shoto-kun, who is in the next room over. And the doctors will come soon after I let the nurses know you're awake.
The adult woman explained before starting a 3-second countdown.
Why is Todoroki in the next room over?
The teen asked, growing more than a little concerned. The thing people call my father didn't take too kindly to me being concerned about you and made his displeasure known, violently and publicly. A flat male voice said from the door. 3 pairs of eyes shot toward the door to see the heterochromatic teen standing there with his IV stand in hand, holding onto the door. Bandages were visible on his face, arms, and hands. While he didn't quite look like a mummy, it was rather obvious the boy was heavily injured. The boy limped into the room, but otherwise seemed to ignore the obvious pain he was feeling to add. But that is unimportant. How are you feeling, Yumecha? The teen girl was caught between blushing and at being addressed in such a manner by the boy, who had never done so before, angered at him for minimizing his own injuries, and infuriated at the so-called pro-hero endeavor. Her cheeks grew red as she silently gestured for Eri to get off of her. The little girl reluctantly did so, but took back her big sister's hand in both of hers. Whether that was to keep the girl in bed or for her own sense of security, no one could guess.
Unimportant?
The girl had apparently settled upon being appalled as she started to speak up, but paused as she remembered that not only was one of her parents in the room, but so was her little sister.
I hardly call being hospitalized after being assaulted by that miserable excuse of a man unimportant. Just because I'm hospitalized doesn't mean you get to ignore your own injuries, Shoto-kun. Just what did he do to you?
One sec, y'all. I'm gonna take a drink real quick. Sorry about that.
We've asked him the same thing, but he has refused to answer us, kiddo.
Another voice was heard behind him. The frog girl this voice belonged to gave out a couple of soft ribbits as she said,
I told you. You wouldn't be able to slough off answering Yume-chan. You might as well step into the room and take a seat, Shoto-kun.
Came the voice of Ochako behind him.
You know the nurses will come to investigate the large crowd, and the nurses will yell at you less if you're sitting down.
Not to mention, you're keeping her parents from getting to her. Really, you're being very irrational at the moment.
Aizawa's tired voice grumped in his swell. At this point, Yume had reached her limit and pointed to a well-padded reclining chair near her bed.
Toto!
Shoto, said boy interrupted. The greenette teen rolled her eyes weakly and sighed.
Fine. Shoto-kun, sit.
After the whine, her tone changed to brook no further argument. The boy blinked, then moved into the room to comply. Everyone else moved in just in time for a nurse to come to the door and check on the group. Seeing the patient belonging to this room awake, and the patient belonging in the next room over once again sneaking in, the nurse gave an exasperated huff and went to let the doctors know.
Good boy,
Yume said once Shoto sat, earning an arched brow in her direction.
You want to be treated like a human? Then act like one. That means taking care of yourself when you are hurt and listening when the doctors tell you something for your own good.
She huffed. The boy just continued to look at her, but before either one could say anything more, Inko and the other adults of their household descended upon the teen one at a time to hug them. The grumpy black-haired man was last, whispering something in his ear. The girl looked at him in surprise, then closed her eyes and visibly counted down from 10 twice in Japanese and English, followed by muttering.
Murder is not setting a good example.
Oh, excuse me.
Murder is not setting a good example. So Shoto-kun, care to explain what just happened? Just what happened?
The normally stoic boy looked distinctly uncomfortable as he sat there silently. He was saved for a few minutes by nurses coming in and berating him, apparently yet again, for leaving his bed against doctor's orders. Another nurse checked Yume's vitals and assured her that the doctor and recovery girl were on their way. She smiled at the nurse checking her over and thanked her, then turned her attention to stare at the boy. The boy sighed once and then relayed his tale from the breakfast on. After the story finished, the hospitalized intersex teen asked,
According to what you told me, he was hardly ever there for breakfast. What changed now? And that does seem a bit extreme for you not answering him.
The man's instability issues aside,
Shoto Aizawa grumbled.
I actually found a bit more when I filed my action report. It appears he's losing his case to keep his wife committed in the hospital. Their hearing was supposed to be that day, but they got pushed back to today because of the latest evidence that turned up when the police searched the Todoroki residence. In fact,
he mentioned, looking at a nearby clock,
they started the hearings concerning her mental stability about an hour ago.
Just then, a tentative knock could be heard from the door. Hisashi, being the closest, turned to answer it as Yume asked.
Wasn't she supposed to be at this hospital?
Yes, the youngest Todoroki child answered simply. I was told I'd be notified what the results were when the hearing was finished. The lawyers Fumiyumi Neichan hired assured me that the case was pretty much open and shut after the search of that man's home office was found.
Excuse me.
I hope everything works out for you, Kettle.
Sue interjected.
Yeah.
Ochako agreed. She went one step further and got up to hug the boy, who looked both shocked and embarrassed by the hug.
You need some good news. Both of you do.
She added while looking over to her hospitalized best friend.
Both of you deserve some after what the world put you through.
The gravity girl let go of the boy and was returning to her seat when the door opened, and Hisashi stepped in with a woman with white hair. The rocker remained silent for once and let the woman speak.
Excuse me. I was told I could find my son here.
The woman looked to be in her mid to late 30s and was dressed in a blue short-sleeved blouse. Her pants were darker blue, and she wore a pair of black pumps. In her hand, she carried a medium-sized white purse with a white leather shoulder strap that hung down limply at the moment. She seemed a bit nervous, especially when she realized she had the attention of everyone in the room. Shoto went stiff when he heard his mother's voice, a voice he hadn't heard outside of his memories for years. He sat there frozen with a complex look of yearning and doubt on his face as he silently begged his hero to tell him what to do. The air in the room seemed to freeze still, though there were no discernible drop in tint for sure. Finally, the girl in the bed gave the frozen boy the best smile she could and mouthed,
Go say hi to her.
The two's female friends found a strange sense of irony in the moment, akin to the blind leading the blind. The boy nodded once and stood up to turn toward the sound of the voice.
Mother?
He said softly, gazing upon the woman for the first time since she was taken away. He took a tentative step away from the chair, as if to go up to her, but still looked uncertain. The woman herself wasn't much better off, truth be told. The last interaction they had been painful for both of them, though far more physically for her son. Guilt showed plainly in the woman's eyes as she bowed her head and all but whispered,
I'm so sorry, Shiroku.
Everyone else in the room appeared to hold their breaths as they waited to see what would happen next, except for the three teen girls. They just looked at each other and nodded before turning back to watch the boy finally say,
I never blamed you. I knew what happened. What drove you to do it? For a while, he forbade me from seeing you. Then, he made it clear you didn't want to see me.
That was never true!
the mother almost shouted, forgetting their audience for the moment.
I asked him every time he came. He told me that I was not to concern myself about you. He told me that if he had his way, I'd never see you again.
Inko's and Amiri's expressions both turned sour as they looked at each other. It was clear that they were not fans of the former number 2 hero.
I see,
the teen boy said softly, but with some venom in his voice.
I only wish...
The amount of anger there did surprise everyone in the room, but Yume, who had tears rolling down her cheeks. She reached out to touch her girlfriend's hands, shocking them to look at her for a moment. The girl sighed even as the Ice and Fire user said,
He's in jail now.
The boy stopped, unsure about how to say the next part without upsetting his mother.
He tried to kill you.
She whispered, taking a few steps closer to her son to close the distance between them.
I was told by my lawyers what happened before the hearing. They guessed, correctly, that his lawyer would bring it up in an attempt to destabilize me.
It was only then she appeared to notice everyone else in the room as she turned to Shota and bowed toward him.
Thank you, by the way, for saving my son's life.
I just came at the end to stop the attack. Your son was doing a fine job of holding him off on his own.
The man said.
Oh yes, I heard something about you being able to hold off his attacks, but they didn't mention how.
The Ice Mother said, as she regarded her son.
For the longest time, I wouldn't use my fire because of what he did to you. To us.
The boy started to explain.
But Yume-san told me that it was okay to use a power that had bad memories if I used them in my own way. I was holding him off with ice, but it wasn't enough. He just increased the temperature of the flames. But I remember her words, and yours, and I felt free. So, I used both fire and ice to create a layered shield to hold off his blue flames until Eraserhead had canceled his quirk.
The boy turned his head to look at the girl in the bed and gave her an expression she wasn't sure she could understand, so she simply smiled. Said boy's mother did more than turn her head, however. She turned her body toward the girl and bowed deeply toward the girl and said,
I have heard some good things from my daughter about you. Please continue to treat my son kindly.
Said girl bowed her head in return.
I will.
Excuse me.
I will.
She then turned toward said boy and asked,
Does this mean you've made your peace with using the fire side of your quirk, Shotoku?
The questioned boy stood there for a moment, seemingly coming to terms with something.
I know intellectually that it's my quirk. It will take some time to get used to it before I can do so freely.
That's fair, I think.
Ochako said in response while looking at her friend in the hospital bed. Said teen agreed with her and was about to say something when there was a knock at the door. 3 women entered, 2 of which the teen recognized. Her OBGYN was accompanied by an older woman with syringe-style hairpins in her hair and a large syringe-style cane. She knew Recovery Girl was supposed to be on her case, but she was unfamiliar with the last woman, who appeared to have red and gray hair, brown eyes, and was wearing what looked to be a doctor's coat and over some hospital scrubs. Inko instantly picked up on her daughter's confusion and decided to make things easier for her.
Hello, Hagiwara-sensei, Recovery Girl, Mase-sensei. I'm glad you were able to come on such short notice.
The stranger turned toward her mother and offered a head nod.
It is no problem. I asked to be alerted when Midoriya-chan awakened. I must say I am very curious about her quirk and the healing that is yet to be done.
The youthful hero took a look around the room at the various people present.
I'm going to have to insist that everyone but immediate family step outside while we discuss things with our patient.
She noticed the looks of disappointment in each of the teens' eyes and said,
Midoriya-san is going to have enough to adjust to. She doesn't need people gawking at her while we discuss her recovery.
Recovery Girl, Sensei?
said patient asked tentatively.
I would rather them stay. I don't mind them being here. Well, that is indeed generous of you,
Dr. Hagiwara responded.
I am afraid that is not an option. As it is, I would have asked your parents to step outside too if it were not for the fact that Aizawa-san's quirk would come in handy in case of emergency. We simply cannot afford for you to have any distractions.
Besides,
The new doctor added as she turned toward the heterochromatic teen boy in the room.
Now that a certain someone has seen your fine, he needs to return to his room and rest. If I have to call a nurse to escort him back to his bed and strap him down, I will.
Said boy looked like he very much objected to being removed from the room, but his mother placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered something into his ear. The boy let out a frustrated sigh but nodded.
I will be back later,
Is all he said as he turned toward the door.
Shoto-kun,
The frog girl called out as she also made her way toward the door, taking only a brief moment to look at her brown-haired friend.
Ojako-chan, and I would like to talk to you for a bit if you don't mind, Kettle.
The boy looked at the two contemplatively, before nodding and starting to leave the room. Let's see. Sorry, was trying to figure out who was speaking.
Why don't I take our special little listener for an apple? This is likely to be a long conversation, and it is nearing snack time for a certain caller.
Eri looked like she very much did not want to leave, but a gentle hug reassurance from Yume got her to agree. Finally, the only people left in the room besides the doctor and the patient were Namuri, Inko, and Shoto.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay. I don't know how much you remember from the conversation you had with my husband and Hagiwara-sensei before you were anesthetized, but here's what happened and what was decided.
Dr. Mase then detailed the decision in the operation to open a tract from her groin to the uterus. The explanation of cloning parts of her skin to set up the vestiges of an entrance was detailed, causing the teen to flush.
It is important to remember we used an MRI scan to locate where your body was going to make the opening. While we were able to make the opening, it is rudimentary at best. Normally, we would have you heal for a month, or at least a week under recovery girl's care, and then perform other operations to smooth things out. Then again, normally you would have had the male stork's organs removed as well.
That did not happen because we three agreed that your quirk would most likely grow them back.
Recovery girl emphasized.
I know this has been said repeatedly before, but for all intents and purposes, your body is shaping to be chimerical in that way. And any attempts to deviate from that path medically is likely to be met with complications, to say the least.
We've also had an endocrinologist monitor your hormone levels to determine a baseline. As of yet, we cannot say if both sets of organs are fully functional, but it is clear from your menstruation that at least your female organs appear to be operating properly. With all that in mind, we have decided to conduct certain tests to see if your quirk can speed up the process. Normally, as we told your parents, you would be barred from major physical exertion and quirk usage for about 6 months, as we perform some of the ancillary surgeries and allow time for your body to heal.
The surgeon summarized. let's see.
What will happen today is that we will ask one of your mothers to go replace Yamada-san so he could come here to help supervise. You will then pick which form you wish to use to heal yourself and attempt the first healing step, which would be to heal the newly formed vagina.
Recovery girl announced.
You will not attempt anything else today, as that is likely to be exhausting for you. You will also not attempt any further steps until we tell you to, and even then, 3 of 5 people must be present, with Yamada-san and Aizawa-san being required. Is that clear?
The girl nodded and Namuri gave Inko a hug before stepping out of the room.
While your court counselor is being summoned, I was meaning to ask you about the real-life test you have been undergoing. How's that going for you?
The intersex teen looked down at her hands as her cheek gained a soft pink hue.
Well, I have noticed while I appear to have more confidence when I'm portraying my feminine side,
The girl started without trying to modify her voice.
I don't exactly feel 100% comfortable as a girl all the time. There have been times in the past few weeks where I felt confused and uncertain of my identity. How so?
The woman asked as the other 2 medical professionals started to approach the bed to take notes from the various monitors.
I felt something like an imposter wearing the girl's clothes at times. I mean, I knew they were my clothes, and I knew that my friends and the people at school knew what was going on, but
You felt more like a boy wearing a dress.
The youthful hero remarked as she looked at the chart at the foot of the bed. The intersex teen nodded a couple of times before saying,
yeah, it didn't last long. The longest that feeling lasted was about a day. But that's what I felt. It's a good thing we didn't do a full SRS then,
the surgeon said as she started to pull the sheets away from Yume's body.
I know this is likely to be embarrassing, but we need to see how things are going with your body. But please don't be embarrassed by your feelings about being a boy or a girl. Everyone is different. Even the way transgendered people feel varies. There are some who never complete SRS. They stop at having breasts, and that is fine.
She added as she started to measure Yume's development.
And with you, I have to ask, do you think your body might be influencing your thoughts?
Yume heard the door open then close. She looked up to see her papa enter the room. After getting a smile and a thumbs up from the man, she answered Hagiwara Sensei's question.
It might. I can't be totally sure, but part of it feels right. I know you talked about this with your counselor, Yume-chan.
Her mother said softly.
Did she go over your options?
The girl nodded and sighed.
I am beginning to think that I'm neither all boy nor all girl, but both. I know that's what my body is turning out to be, but I can't decide if I'm third gender or gender fluid. I think one of those 2 labels will pretty much describe me as I grow. I'm just not sure which one fits. Though, I have to say, most of the time I feel more comfortable as a girl, but it's just not all the time.
She looked at each of her parents and asked,
What do you think? We can't answer that for you, sweetie.
The green-haired woman responded sweetly.
We can't experience what you're feeling, nor can we read your thoughts.
The intersex teen was a little downhearted downhearted by that. She wanted something to be simple in her life, at least for once. Still, it was consistent with everything her counselor and everyone else had told her before, so at least her luck was consistent. Still, she knew this wasn't the only thing they needed to focus on, so she looked up at the doctor's nest.
Now that Hisapapa is here, what are we doing next?
The three women looked at the blonde man and waved him forward. They talked for a few moments in whispers before they looked back to the patient, Hisashi being the one to speak up.
Yume, we need you to transform into one of your magical forms. One of those that can self-heal. And we can take notes and see what changes there are. I suggest Shimal, personally.
The teen looked between the four of them and thought about it for a moment. Then she said,
I'm not sure beginning the healing process in my transformed state will work.
The four adults looked between each other with confused expressions before looking back at her. This time, Recovery Girl took charge.
Why not?
The teen took a few moments to put her thoughts into order and said,
As Hisapapa knows, I've been working on my healing powers when transformed. Part of that involved monitoring my body while it transformed. What I didn't tell Papa is that the last time I used Shimal's form, I kept the scan going as long as I could during the transformation. Back to my base form. It turns out there's an order in which my body transforms. It happens so fast a lot of times that people can miss it, but there's definitely a delay. The changes go from outer appearance to inner body, then to power sets, and from there I don't know. The change in power sets stopped the scan, but what I can say is that her rings disappeared just after I stopped being able to sense my body.
The four adults responsible for this experiment nodded along with their explanation up to that point, though the voice hero was obviously following the trail of thought, one that Yume quickly voiced.
That, of course.
Oh, excuse me.
That, of course, was from Magical Girl to base form. But if the other holds the same when going from base form to Magical Girl, then there may be a problem in that by the time I can activate healing powers. My inner body would already be in ideal form.
Her mother sighed as she sat down in the chair the heterochromatic boy had sat in.
Things never are that easy for you, are they, Yume?
The three medical professionals and her Quirk counselor seemed to agree as they mulled over the information. One sec, y'all. Taking a drink real quick. The atmosphere in the room darkened for a moment, but eventually Dr. Masse thought of something.
Okay. So we won't be able to get you to scan your form during the transformation to Magical Girl. But what about during the transformation back? I know you have a certain time limit you can stay in that form, and a certain number of times a day you can transform. Can you cut that short and save your energy for an additional transformation?
We have not tried that yet,
President Mike answered.
but it is worth a shot. But we still run the problem of her not being able to use her healing powers until after the transformation is complete.
The song user sat there on the bed deep in thought as she considered everything they had done so far.
Mike-sensei.
She said as she turned to her father. This was common for them to be formal when discussing Quirk training, so her use of the formal form of his name got his attention.
I think we can test two different questions and maybe find a solution. There was one thing we didn't try yet that could prove fruitful.
That statement got the attention of every adult in the room as they looked between the father and the child. Said parent tilted his head to the side and asked,
What question are you referring to, pre-stage performer?
Could using the power trigger song of a song using magical coral trigger the transformation? And conjointedly, when would said power activate?
But Shimal doesn't use songs for her powers, little one.
her quirk counselor reminded her.
No, but I'm proposing just singing the first couple lines for Nanoha to bring Shimala. Then I do the scan during the short time the form is active. Along with keeping the scan active while I detransform, so I can know what my body looks like medically. Then I use the form from the most recent anime I watched, using her healing song first to test the limits of my quirk and its transformation sequences.
The teen proposed.
I can't say I'm a fan of such large power expenditures.
The youthful heroine interjected.
Especially for untested theories. You just woke up from a surgery. You're still under the residual effects of anesthesia, and both of those factors will affect your concentration.
I understand.
The teen said solemnly.
That's why we have Dad here, right? In case something goes wrong?
The three medical women looked between each other and appeared to hold a silent conversation between them.
I'm not trying to be reckless here. I'm just trying to show that we can make this as safe as can be.
Fine,
The medical hero said in a huff.
but you will eat some of these gummies before you start this tomfoolery. That way I can ensure your energy levels will be as high as we can make them.
The song user readily agreed and ate all the gummies provided to her. Then sat in silence for a short time while the adults appeared to get ready. A nurse came in with additional monitoring equipment, which was attached to different parts of the teen's body, by the surgeon while a gynecologist gave her lower region another examination. A half hour later, everyone was finally ready as the girl sat in her hospital bed and sung the first few lines of her go-to Nanoha song. Alright. So the song that plays is Maho Lyrical Shoujo Nanoha Striker's first opening by Mizuku Nana. I have no idea what this sounds like because I've never listened to it, so I'll just say it. Mune ni yadoro atsuki suise wa hajimari nao koto he. A bright light flashed in the room before the teenager in the bed was replaced with another woman wearing what amounted to a military-style uniform with shoulder-length blonde hair. On her right hand were 3 rings. While the form looked familiar at least to the surgeon, the other 2 medical ladies did not recognize her. Only a couple of lines of the song were sung, just enough to give them a couple of minutes.
Clairwind, activate scanning mode. Subject, Knight of the Lake, Shimal.
The girl said the moment the transformation was complete. The other doctors got to work pretty quickly and started to examine the body as thoroughly as they could with as much speed as they could. In the meantime, the magical girl's device acknowledged the order and began to display medical information of its own. Inko quickly took notes on what the display was telling them, while at the same time trying to stay out of the doctor's way. No one said anything while they were working, but you may notice she understood everything that the display her mother was taking notes on meant. That seemed odd to her, since the teen had absolutely no medical training outside of what she taught herself to her hide her wounds. She was thankful for the notes, as after a short minute since she transformed, her body glowed again. Yume tried to focus on slowing the transformation time down as much as possible, to eke out just a little more information, but it was still over almost too quickly. Still, the three medical women seemed excited as they put their heads together and conversed rapidly. After a few minutes, they broke apart and Recovery Girl handed the transforming teen some more gummies.
Tell me how you feel now, and what you felt when you transformed.
Well,
The girl began as she ate the energy-boosting tree.
the pain I've been feeling in my midsection went away when I transformed. It was over too fast for me to be able to tell when in the process it happened, but the scans from Clairwind showed that I had fully functioning, intact reproductive system, even if it was in stasis. Yes, I noticed that too.
Her mother spoke up. The three others turned to Inko, who smiled and shrugged.
I'm an RN. So, while you were busy looking over my daughter's transformed body, I was taking notes on what the diagnostics said. The scan showed no signs of there ever being a surgery done in that area of the body. However, it did show that beyond the secretion of necessary hormones, her reproductive system was in stasis. That stasis had a timer, but I'm unsure what that meant. It meant that the form of Shimol I took was after their release from the Book of Darkness, and their bodies were reintegrating with the time stream. They were in the process of being able to age, reproduce, and die, though those particular traits were not yet fully active.
The teen interjected.
How do you know that?
Recovery Girl asked incredulously.
When I called for the scan, something shifted in my head, and I found myself having just enough knowledge to be able to understand what my device was telling me, or at least the knowledge that the character would have had.
Interesting.
President Mike said.
Is that fading now that you're in your base form?
It doesn't feel like it.
The girl replied.
At least, I can remember what the readings said when I transformed back. I remember enough that Clairwind picked up on the surgical stars and what it called imperfections in the surgery that need correction. That is simultaneously fascinating and beneficial if you can retain that knowledge.
The surgeon spoke up.
This way, we only need to compare your notes, and you have a more thorough understanding of what you need to do when we move on to the second phase of this experiment.
The teen could only agree as the doctors went over their notes with the teen. They were purposefully waiting for another half hour to pass before they allowed the teen to try again. So the song that plays now is Lost Song, Song of Healing, for artist unknown, so oof. And it's in Japanese too, so I will say it. Mezame sa so futa wo hito wa koro de kurikaiso. The process of transformation appeared just a little slower than the previous times. Whether that was from Yume purposefully trying to extend the timing of their transformation, or from the effects of the song, no one but her could tell. But everyone noticed that the girl's abdomen glowed briefly before the white flash that occurred with her transformation spread out from that area. Overall, the time it took for the transformation to occur was stretched to maybe a half a second from the near instantaneous transformations before. But it was noticeable. Owari naki tabi no naka de dare mo mina sagashiteru. Even more noticeable was that the light receded in the exact same order it had first flared, but the light seemed to stay centered on her lower abdomen throughout the rest of her short song. The song itself was only a couple of minutes long, so the doctors hurried to get more information from the team.
Can you tell me how that information differed from the other previous ones? From the others previous? Were you trying to extend your transformation duration?
Her Quirk counselor asked.
Yes, I was. I was trying to get a feel for the order of change. It was a good thing, too, since I noticed the order of transformation was different from base to magical girl form. I don't know what exactly caused the order of transformation to shift, but the order went power first, outer appearance second, followed by inner organs. This meant my knowledge of the process for healing in this form came very fast since that was what I was focusing on, and it mixed with the knowledge I retained from Shimo's form,
The teen answered.
Just like the previous transformation, your body appears as if there were never a surgery performed there. The test will be what happens when you transform back. We'll have to do a full physical checkup to see what changes have occurred,
Dr. Mase explained. The other medical professionals seemed to agree, so after checking a few more things, they stepped back to allow for time to run out. Hisashi, on the other hand, had something to ask.
Can you develop a test to see how much medical knowledge Yumeya-chan has retained? We could give it to her in a couple of days. Odds are, if I remember my biology right, if it fades, it will fade by then.
We could.
Excuse me,
We could.
Recovery Girl replied.
But that is apt to be very specific knowledge. I doubt she has full knowledge of a MD in her mind.
This response was accompanied by a questioning look toward the song user, who nodded her head in agreement.
There are things that I have picked up intellectually from forms, but my body hasn't been able to replicate. For example, I know how to use a bladed whip, at least intellectually, but my body hasn't been trained to do so yet. Same goes for various spells from my various forms have,
Said Tina explained.
I know we talked about this before.
Yes, we did. It's just, this is the first time the knowledge bled over to pure knowledge. That wasn't almost purely quirk-based. I've been trying to find ways to test how deep that knowledge goes.
The Quirk counselor returned. That appeared to make sense to everyone in the room, and the medical professionals agreed to come up with a suitable test to figure out her medical knowledge.
Do not use your healing abilities for anything more major than bruising, without proper medical supervision, you hear me?
Recovery Girl reinforced.
You don't have the prerequisite knowledge to practice medicine, and even in today's age of quirks, there's still laws about quirk use for that purpose for a good reason.
Just about that time, the transformation wore off, and Yume did not attempt to alter the process any. This form didn't have the tools that her other form had, and she decided to take good advice and left it to the professionals to ascertain what happened. This was a good thing too, since Yume felt very tired when the transformation was complete. The resulting examination took about 15 minutes to complete. The doctors and Recovery Girl got together to discuss their feelings before turning to the group.
Okay, there's good news and mediocre news.
Dr. Hagiwari stated.
The good news is using that particular form of transformation did allow her to use some healing on her base form. While it didn't heal her completely, it did speed the healing along substantially. Instead of 6 to 9 months like we originally thought, it will take about 1 month. But during that time, there is to be no strenuous physical activity.
The intersex girl looked relieved at that news.
I can live with that. It will be difficult getting back into shape after that month, but that's to be expected. What is the mediocre news? We will need at least 1 or 2 more surgeries during that month time frame.
Dr. Masse said.
Your healing is basically taking care of what's there, but it isn't taking care of the shaping that needs to be done. This means you will still need to be doing the contraction exercises after the surgeries are completed. Those will have to continue for 2 months to build muscle strength.
Furthermore, quirk-wise, your quirk is still altering things somewhat, but at a slower pace than before. That is why we don't know if there will need to be 1 or 2 more surgeries. As it stands right now, depending on the form you take, your recovery rates for healing may be on par with minor regeneration.
Recovery Girl remarked.
Note I said minor regeneration. Take care to not lose a hand or an arm. You probably won't be able to heal that.
So in essence, my quirk is still weird. That seems to be the gist of it, sweetie,
Her mother said. Alrighty. That was a heck of a chapter. So, looks like they definitely went through with surgery. No, well, they did. I like that the author, DrGN, actually took the time to bring up that not all transgender people fully transition, because that's something I've actually been considering a lot lately, but it's not really the place to talk about that. I might make a video on it sometime soon. But thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with me tonight and listening along. I will be trying to have another video up tomorrow, but we'll have to see to be sure. My voice is kind of rough, so I will have to try and record it again record later when I wake up. But all that being said, if you like don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see all of you in my next video. Ciao for now.